today. So normally we would wait politely for people to join, but we have no time for that because we have a lot to get through in this hour. So I shall start by gently introducing the agenda for today. And as people join in, they are most welcome. We've got three purposes for this webinar. One of them is to share the GPA Innovation Norway's new course corrections report, which the team have worked on this year. The picture of it is there on the right of the screen, and the link to the report, if you haven't read it already, will appear in the chat imminently. The second objective of today is to get a really candid conversation going from practitioners in the field in energy access, not just humanitarian energy, but energy access more broadly, and hear some of their course corrections that they're going to very generously share with you in the Q&A section. You can see in the orange banner down below, please, type in any questions as they occur to you in the chat. We'll hand over to Nazifa at the end of the panel discussion to go through some of those questions. So please do type them in as we go throughout the course of our time today. And then the third objective towards the end of this call, we'll be hearing about this new concept of the Humanitarian Energy Learning Platform. And then we will finish with some closing remarks from GPA. What I'd like to do now is just to introduce or invite the project team to introduce ourselves. So I'll start, and then Tash, I'll hand over to you. Hello, I'm Ronan Ferguson, independent consultant as of the last just over a year. Prior to that, worked in the market strengthening team at Clean Cooking Alliance. Tash?
Thank you, Ronan. Hi, everyone. My name is Tash. I'm a researcher. I work both as an academic and as an independent consultant. Most of my work is on energy access, a lot of it clean cooking. Thank you very much for joining today. Over to Nazifa.
Hi everyone, I'm a third year PhD student at the Department of Geography, University of Cambridge. I study disasters in humanitarian settings, and on the side, I do work in humanitarian energy.
Hi everyone, I'm Paul Quigley and I'm working with the GPA as a consultant also, looking at energy access in displacement settings for 12 or 13 years now. Good to be with you.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. And Canary, we will come to you in the panel discussion. So thank you for that. Let's go to some opening remarks. Therese, if I could hand over to you for the next 5 minutes.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the launch of this report today. My name is Teresa, and I lead the Humanitarian Innovation Program at Innovation Norway. And over the past year or so, we've had the privilege of working closely with the GPA and an outstanding research team, the one you just met, led by Tash Paris, on what began as the Energy Failure Project. And jointly, we wanted to figure out how we could more efficiently build future energy projects on learnings from past efforts, ensuring that we enforce elements of success and avoid repeating what has failed. However, early on, we realized that the word failure is a challenging word, especially in a sector that relies on voluntary contributions to fulfill its mandate. So that's why we adopted a title that better reflects our ambition, and that is now the title of the report: Course Corrections, Learning from the Past to Design for the Future, Improving Effectiveness and Efficiency in Humanitarian Energy. The Humanitarian Innovation Program that I lead is set up to incentivize, de-risk, and support humanitarian private innovation partnerships. And this is because we see that there is considerable untapped potential in solid, impact-based partnerships across sectors, at the same time as they're challenging to enter into and characterized by risks for the partners involved. So our aim is to be catalytic by supporting innovation, efforts to establish long-term trust-based partnerships, and making it easier to capitalize from private sector capacity and competency for humanitarian impact. And we have a number of energy projects in our portfolio. Energy access for people affected by crisis is very far from being realized, in spite of the significant protection and resilience impact that energy access has. It's easy to think about the energy sector as a source of innovations because of rapidly developing technologies. However, the energy innovation projects that we have supported so far have not been technology focused. They've been process and business model innovations. Projects have been designed around the challenge of what it will take to provide sustainable access to existing technology for people affected by crisis. And we tell the innovators that we support that if we, during the course of our collaboration, do not hear about anything that has gone wrong, any challenges at all, we either assume that they're hiding challenges from us or that they're not really innovating and pushing boundaries to improve the status quo. Because when we try new things, we will meet challenges. Everything will not be as expected, and that's okay. However, it's only okay if we learn from it and avoid repeating mistakes. Yet we see that key lessons learned, or as Tash says, lessons earned, mostly stay within the core project group. At best, they're shared in a couple of conferences and meetings and perhaps a published report. And our sector is wide. The humanitarian ecosystem is very complex. So our question is, how do we best share these lessons learned? How do we ensure that future innovators can truly build on the experience of those before them? Because status quo is not an option. The funding gap is no longer a gap, it's a void. And we need to rapidly make sure that all available funding is spent as efficiently as possible. And that includes being open about and sharing lessons learned. So in a minute, Paul Quigley will share some of these lessons with us. And my question to you is, how do we, as members of the humanitarian community, safeguard this knowledge and ensure we build on it moving forward? How do we maximize the impact of energy projects to ensure that the potential is realized in a sustainable way? Our aim for this webinar is not just to present the report, it's an invitation to rethink how we design, deliver, and learn in humanitarian energy with honesty, openness, and shared accountability. So thank you so much for attending. Please take an active part in the discussion. We would love to hear from all of you. And with that, I'd like to give the word back to Ronan.
Thank you very much, Therese, for the opening words there. Paul, let's hand over to you for the project overview.
Thanks, Ronan. As you said, we have a lot to cover, so it won't be too long. So we're just looking at the project and why it's important. What was the purpose of doing this project? And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to improve the impact of our work. To have more successful projects and programs, moving away from kind of glossy reports which present everything as wonderful, so we can get more funding when we know the real story isn't quite so perfect as that. So we have a situation here. Investment landscape isn't great at the moment. It's very challenging. So how do we find a way to openly share the lessons learned and what went wrong, as long as what went well as well, so we can all benefit from challenges experienced, mistakes made, and at the end of the day, create better outcomes. So looking at the kind of key questions we're trying to look at, or what we're trying to do with this, identify the causes of what is it that goes wrong within a project, what sort of barriers that keep coming up again and again, so that we can create sort of frameworks which allow us to take actions from these lessons and then promote open sharing and learning towards improved efficiency, better impacts, better outcomes, etc. So next slide, please. Just looking at some of the summary of the findings. I mean, the project involved reviewing literature, lots of reports, blogs, articles, some academic papers, and, multiple interviews, looking at several case studies to analyze what are the most common challenges and explore the sort of ways to improve sharing lessons from those. And I think everyone agreed that, all of design, implementation, and outcomes would definitely benefit from us openly sharing the good stories, the bad stories. And what we're trying to do is find a better way to go about making that happen. How can we enable sharing? How can we open up that space? And people are quite willing to share, but not as much so if findings are written down and to be published. That creates an additional hurdle rather than opening it up. So using a kind of a space, an informal but structured approach is a way, probably a better way to promote shared learning in this kind of way. And then another important thing was that there's difficulties in every project. I don't think I've ever been involved in a project where there were no problems at all. You always have sort of things where you go, oh, I wish I did it a different way. If I did it again, I'd do this instead of that, or whatever. So this is, as Therese mentioned, shifted us from looking at failures to more focusing on course corrections. What do we want to look at is evaluating the things we can actually do to adapt or to bring innovations into our projects so we can best apply these shared learnings to improve the outcomes. Another key point was related to context and combining humanitarian and development approaches. And with so many protracted displacement situations, energy projects are aiming at market-based approaches and sustainability. And this sort of leads to increased self-reliance, integration, international policies and programs. But not every context this can be applied to. So sometimes that approach is not what works in that context, and sustainability may not be achievable in some circumstances. And the barriers are at a completely different sort of political level, maybe beyond our ability to influence within our own program or project on energy. So they're just some of the key findings. You'll find some additional ones in the report. Next slide, please, Ronan. In order to help us to evaluate the lessons that we learned in doing a project, we created a form for assessing the most common barriers and expressing within that the specific learnings from projects. And this was done with a focus across several different aspects, including technical, economic, implementation, etc. And what we saw was there's a bit of a variance between what is written down in interviews. They're quite different to each other in some ways, and maybe somewhat due to people's reluctance to openly share details when it's written down or published. Whereas if you're having a more informal chat, it's a bit more open. So reports, while they can be useful, they don't always tell the full story. And it may be easier to ask more questions and understand nuances and important details in a conversation than in reports. This was one of the key things there. Next slide, please. And we ended up focusing on 7 specific case studies, which we evaluated. And these were spread across each of these challenge categories, technical, economic, social, etc., and also covered different energy needs, such as household, productive use, or operational use. And these case studies were used to test and refine this learning form and to evaluate how lessons learned were shared really and expressed within that. It's not intended to be an in-depth analysis, but we did find that the form provided a good snapshot of the projects and the key lessons and takeaways from that. And you would see these more fully, again, in the report itself. So we won't go into the details of these projects now. We're going to explore some key lessons with you from other projects and other actors. So back over to you, Ronan. Thank you.
Great. Thanks ever so much, Paul, for that cantering overview. And hopefully that gives people on the call who haven't had the chance to read the report, you feel like your appetite has been whetted to go and do so. Please. And yes, so let's go into the next session, which is, or the next section of the call, which is the panel discussion and Q&A. We were going to start with Shadrach from SNV, who had some really interesting lessons from the MBEA project in Kakuma. This wouldn't be a webinar about course corrections without its own course correction, as Shadrach has been held up with some travel disturbances. So I think it actually is down to 2, but we're very ably joined by Canary and Claudia from Tolima Solar and Biomasters, respectively. So what I would love to do actually is just to have you both introduce yourselves quickly, and then Canary, I'll come to you with some questions on learnings from Tolima Solar. But perhaps I could hand over to you first, Canary, just to introduce yourself.
Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Canary Williams Bogere. I'm the commercial manager for Tolima Solar, in charge of market systems development. Tolima Solar deals in productive use of energy equipment, specifically solar-powered irrigation solutions and agro-processing machines. We have 4 locations in the country: Uganda. We are headquartered in Kampala, but have a presence in the northern region, that is in Lira, in Arua, and Obongi. Currently, what we offer is a customer-tailored solution to their needs, where we provide design for customer systems. Then we also provide credit financing for those pay as you go, for those that want to be provided that. Sometimes we also link them to our partners that support in financing, that is commercial banks or microfinances that are available. We also, after that, also do installation and education. And the major critical part is provide after-sale service for a period of up to 2 years without charge. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Canary. So maybe actually sticking with you to learn a little bit more about the learnings that you've encountered. So, and by way of context, our own report in the Gray and scientific literature really found that a lot of emphasis was placed on customers' inability or unwillingness to pay for products or services as being a major source of disruption for the project and not delivering on its intended outcomes. Now, you did a pilot with Acumen that offered a 40% subsidy to refugees, but it still didn't gain traction. So what happened, and what did the experience teach you, please?
Thank you, Ronan. Indeed, we got, when we got that a subsidy of 40% to the areas that are host refugees, first of all, we're very new in the area. So one, we're new and then started off with a subsidy. That was a combination that was quite difficult. First of all, selling a product which we feel is valuable to them, that is going to improve their livelihood. We thought it's going to be easy, but we found out that actually those that were actually buying were hosts and not necessarily the refugees. And the question was stemming from the element of affordability. But even during with the hosts, the uptake was very, very low. So what we had to do was to rethink on how we actually approaching the market. We had to actually get the support of key partners that were actually on ground. And these included, first of all, the input dealers that were on ground, that were actually working with majority of these farmers. Some of these input dealers included Aggregate, included OMIA, Development Services, that provides input and extension service to these people. So because they were known in the area, they supported us a lot to ensure that our product was actually accepted by some of the people. But still, the question of affordability wasn't answered. In as much as they saw that the product was working, but affordability became a challenge. What we did, we also introduced pay as you go, but still, because we're not mandated to provide financing to refugees, especially under the Prime Minister's office, because you have to be licensed to actually provide credit to refugees, we could not actually do so. So also had to partner with another financing institution, that is the Vision Fund, which was on ground and was permitted to provide financing to the refugees there. So we partnered with them and were able to support us, but still the uptake was very low. Until I think a point when we had another subsidy, where the subsidy was increased to 60%. That's when we're actually able to get more traction. Earlier on, the traction was minimal, but after when it was increased to 60%, we actually had more traction. That really showed us that with higher subsidies, these people would actually look at this as they would actually accept the solution on the ground. But the other element, again, that I need to point out is even with that, still you see that the hosts uptake more than the refugees. So we also ventured into something where we tried financing groups with one of our partners, that is Mastercorps. We tried financing with groups that are actually refugee owned, and that was a good success. We actually had more traction from the groups than even earlier before. So I believe that would be, that's another learning we got out of that. Then the other bit, because we were new, there always this question that we do not know you. In as much as you are working with these people, we need to know who you are and where you are based, because we're relying on our travels from our nearby offices, that was Lira or Kampala or Arua. We're forced to actually have a presence closer, that is in Obongi, which has one of the biggest refugee settlement places, that was Palorinya. So we had to actually open an office closer so that we're able to serve these customers better. So the moment you mention that we actually have a presence in Obongi, the customers would actually feel that you're actually closer to them. So physical presence was very critical. Thank you, Ronan.
Yeah, really interesting, Canary. Thank you. And I just invite people who've joined the webinar late, please do type away your questions in the chat, and we will come to those shortly. They can be questions for Canary, for Claudia, or for the project team. But just coming back to you, Canary, so some really good lessons in there. Could you share maybe some, and you can underline maybe what you've already said, but what would you share by way of practical recommendations for private sector, for funders trying to enter these markets for the first time? What would you recommend?
Okay. One of the recommendations I would give is, one, establishing the right kind of partnerships when you're actually joining in such areas that already have that have a presence there. Just like we have mentioned, we did with the existing partners there. For us, our approach is always we look for partners that are actually working directly with farmers, from input dealers to extension service providers, to off-takers, to civil society organizations that actually support farmers. That is our approach in any area that we go to. So likewise, for any person who is going into that area, look at the value chain that you are in and look at the partners that actually can help you get into that market with ease. The second bit is the understanding of the value that you're actually providing. We've mentioned the issue of affordability, but I think the question comes to the kind of value that you're actually providing, because most times we look at the cost of the product and we think that the more cheaper it becomes, the better we'll sell. But I think look at your value and what it does to the community. We look at what we provided. We had lower sales at the beginning, but the few sales that we made and the support that we provided the farmers in terms of customer service, in terms of after-sales service, in terms of the impact the product had on them, once other farmers saw what was happening to them, to the changes on those farmers, then they're actually able to accept that the product was actually beneficial to them. So the value of your product is critical in ensuring don't compromise on your pricing simply because you want to hit the market faster. It is important that you also stick to your pricing to get the right customers on ground. Then the other element, I think, in some of these areas, presence is critical, especially when it comes to refugee settlements. They need to actually see that you are present in that area. If you do not have presence in some of these areas, it becomes actually difficult for you to actually support your team, because logistical challenges come in, especially if you are far away from them. For now, I think I could share some of that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Canary. That's really, really insightful. Thank you. And I see the questions coming in, so that's great. Claudia, let's turn to you now and bring ourselves outside of the humanitarian energy landscape for a moment. Would you mind if you are able to come on camera and introduce yourself, introduce Biomasters? Be very interested to hear, what does Biomasters do? Who do you sell to? And how is that made possible?
Great. Thanks, Ronan. My name is Claudia. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Biomasters. Biomasters is a renewable energy company. We're the largest pellet producer in Rwanda. We make pellets out of biomass, mostly hardwood, eucalyptus, wood waste. We have formed out of a previous initiative that existed in Rwanda. It was called Inyenyeri. And some of the former employees of Inyenyeri got together and founded Biomasters. Our business model essentially now is that we are all about pellets. So pellets is 70% of our revenue, and we really are looking for this repeat revenue. We serve about 25,000 people. We have diversified and de-risked our business model to not only serve households, but also institutions like schools and industrial customers. We believe in like a model that serves mainly urban household customers that have the cash to pay for a product that we produce. We do provide the tools to be able to use the pellets. So that is either tier 4 gasifier stoves that we either fully import or assemble here in Rwanda. We've designed kind of a semi-local version of the stove that we used to import fully, or the burners that we import and provide to schools so they can use our pellets. We gather a lot of data for our carbon methodology, which is a gold standard metered and measured methodology, so fairly transparent or very transparent. And really, I would say we've gone through a number of course corrections, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but we have kind of switched a bit from seeing ourselves as a clean cooking company to more of a local employer using local resources and providing renewable energy. So we've shifted a little bit our thinking on that front.
Great. No, thank you for the introduction, Claudia. I'm going to take a moment to share with you in an attempt to try and embolden you to share bravely by picking up on something that Paul Quigley mentioned in his notes, that no project that he's been, no project that I've been in has ever gone perfectly. There's always been things that have gone slightly wrong and required course corrections. And just to be honest about our project in terms of this report that we're launching today with the webinar. Yeah, lots of things went wrong. We thought we would get the report out in April. It came out 6 months later. We spent somewhere up to 90% more project days on the project than we initially thought. We found it very difficult to even find the right people to interview, and of those that we did, we found it very difficult, as Paul mentioned, to agree on what to put down in writing, which I think contributed to a little bit to some of the delays that we and extra work that we experienced. And I suppose ultimately one of the key concepts of our report, this humanitarian energy learning platform, is an idea and remains an idea at the moment, but we'll hear a bit more about that from Tash and Amy at the back end of this call. So yeah, lots of things don't go as you originally expect and hope. So with that in mind, Claudia, and you mentioned it in your intro around the backstory for Biomasters and group of employees from an institution in Nyeri coming together. Yeah, what role have course corrections made in your company's history?
Well, we basically, the first document we put together when we founded the company was what went wrong, what went well, what do we want to continue doing, and what do we have to stop doing after the company had to file for insolvency, the previous company. And I was the finance director of that company. So I had a good insight also into the nitty-gritty in terms of the financials and the contracts. And I would say the first thing we said was we need to be very clear whether we want to be an NGO, we want to give away product for free, or we want to be commercial, and which markets do we target. And we will not just for a grant try out things that are high risk. We will take grants that support our business model that we agreed on. So that was the first part. Then we also said we will do minimal R&D. We will use products that are already in the market and tried and tested and proven, and also proven technology. And we will only make minor adjustments to our product because we just simply didn't have the resources and the skills and the capacity to do own research. But we were lucky. We already had a really good good product and a good supplier in terms of the stoves, and we knew how to make pellets. Then throughout kind of the journey of Biomasters, we started off with a pilot with a subscription model where basically people receive the stove for free as long as they would buy a certain amount of kgs of pellets every month. And most customers actually stayed below that because of purchasing power. And so then we changed to say, okay, you can pay off the stove in installments, and you can use as much or as little pellets as you want. This pay-go idea turned out quite costly for us, and a lot of resources and management went into trying to chase payments. Then we tried to partner with microfinance organizations to take the financing part on for us. All of them local microfinancing partners, but that also didn't work so well because often the collateral they're asking of people for a fairly cheap and small asset was not matching what people were willing to sign up for with these organizations. Then we had a project with Lend with Care in the UK, a crowdfunding platform, and they offered to pay for a certain number of stoves for free, and the distribution of those stoves had to be for free for the lower socioeconomic customers. And that went well in terms of quick distribution because we were giving away product for free. But the learning here was that 50% of people never used the stove. So they either sold it or they never came back to buy product. And so that was also a big learning. Often it feels like if something is offered for free, it's perceived of no value. And so eventually we came around to the idea that we would sell the stove. So people have they buy a product, it's theirs, they own it, but it's at a price level that they can afford. So it's somewhere between, it's quite a bit of money, but it's not too much that I have to save up for it for more than 2 months. So it's somewhere between aspirational and affordable. And we subsidize the rest of the cost of the stove through carbon credits. It also makes our life a lot easier in terms of administration and management. And then the other course correction that we had done is we had started off with a number of own shops in Kigali, where people had to come or we would organize deliveries for them. And then we found that quite a cumbersome and expensive way of doing things, as well as the proximity to pellets, because we're competing essentially with charcoal that is on every corner. We have to be close to people. So then we transitioned into pop-up shops where we would basically rent a space a couple of days in someone else's shop. We could use 1 or 2 people to have like service 5 of these shops. And now we're transitioning towards more and more a franchise model where someone has to kind of buy into being one of our merchants. They get some branding, but they can sell our product and add their own margin. And we were able to actually add 20 new locations within the last 5 months. So that has worked really well, and we've already seen that consumption of pellets has increased. And maybe the last learning, because most of our learnings were around market penetration and adoption, right? And the last learning was about getting to profitability quick. And we are a pellet company. We need to sell pellets with repeat sales. And while households, the impact is really great by replacing charcoal, there's a lot of like after sales, repairs, maintenance, call center that goes with that, and retail operation, which is very costly. So until we can close the gap in terms of capacity filling for our factory, we experimented with serving schools, retrofitting like firewood stoves with pellet burners, and also looking at industrial customers that take larger volumes. So we're kind of de-risking our business model a little bit by just only serving household customers. Yeah.
Fascinating. Claudia, thank you so much for sharing so much. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really rich. I'll be playing this recording back to write some of this down later. Thank you. It's clear you've got a lot going on, very busy, lots of piloting, testing, learning internally. I'm really genuinely curious, like if this happens, but do you learn from the learnings of other similar adjacent companies? And if so, how does that happen? Is there how do you access that kind of knowledge today?
We have two forums at the moment where one is through the World Bioenergy Association, where African pellet manufacturers and clean cooking companies get together and they share updates and what they're working on. And then the other one is with two other companies on the continent. They're doing something similar, slightly different business models and more focused on carbon, but there we are fairly honest with each other of what's working and what's not working. Also, of course, there's always a different context with different countries, but that's been really good. But I would say also what I really benefit from as an entrepreneur is the in-country exchanges with other entrepreneurs, like here in Rwanda, not necessarily just clean cooking, but also other sectors like agriculture or solar, or what has worked, what hasn't worked. We are an Acumen investee, so Acumen also facilitates kind of entrepreneurs coming together and learning from each other, and they make kind of connections, and also on fundraising and storytelling, and how could this be structured, or do you need support in terms of sales, what has worked, what hasn't worked. So I think you need to generally fight a little bit for getting this information and nurturing those networks, but they are in place. And I'd say not just within the sector, but even outside, just operating in this African space, this new market or challenging market, it's worth also connecting with people outside of your sector. And that's really helped.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. I've just done a quick roll call. I don't see Shadrach has managed to join, so I hope his travel is progressing safely. Nazifa, I'm going to invite you to come on screen, and perhaps you can lead the next section in terms of just the Q&A that has come in through the chat. And whilst you're doing that, I invite other people to continue to hammer in any questions you've got for anyone on the call into the Q&A. Thank you. Nazifa, maybe over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ronan. We do have some questions from the chat. The first one is for Canary. So we have a participant asking whether the differences in the outcomes of the two subsidy programs could potentially be due to the public awareness campaign, and this could potentially also explain the poor uptake among the refugee population, because they do not have access to local communication channels.
Thank you. I would say a bit of yes and no. One, the way we started off in the area, we started with our own sales team on ground, but we supported the team with the local community agents that we recruited within the area, that were both refugee and hosts. So when we started our marketing campaigns, we could actually do in all the areas very effectively. We also supported some of these with the demonstration gardens and provided pumps in those demo gardens, and we actually had some of them in the refugee settings. So the awareness was actually done almost at the same time. However, what we could say that the highest subsidy gained traction maybe because we had already done groundwork at the beginning, and they had already seen the impact of the first customers. So it just exacerbated the entire buying process, but not necessarily that it independent was alone a contribution to this. That's what I would say. I don't know whether I have answered the second bit also.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you,
Yes.
Canary. That's been very helpful. The second question is for Claudia. We have another question from the chat, and they're asking how do investors or potential investors might respond when you explain the story behind Biomasters and how it was built off of the learnings from Ininieri?
Mixed, I would say. There were definitely in the beginning certain organizations that we just couldn't approach for investment or that just decided not to support clean cooking in general anymore. And I think clean cooking in general is a difficult space to navigate because there aren't that many success stories. But in general, I think investors want to see a really capable and enthusiastic and passionate founders team. And when it is a team that is really eager and willing to learn and not to make the same mistakes again, and is not too in love with its own ideas and business models and ready to change when something isn't working, I think that's always a good thing. I think when someone, when investors see that a founder is too blinkered and like too in love with their own idea and doesn't want to change anything, that's generally not a good sign.
Yes, thank you, Claudia. And related to some of the things that both of you have mentioned relating to willingness to pay or the ability to pay, there is a question from the chat for both of you and about whether there were any assessments done on the ability or the willingness to pay of the customers before you launch your project or product. Would you like to go ahead, Claudia, first, since you're on the stage?
So it was really difficult to find accurate data around disposable income. We kind of knew what our target socioeconomic class would be. And then we just did pilots. So we did a couple of small pilots of offering the stove at a certain amount of money, and then we saw kind of what the uptake was, and then what the consumption was. So we kind of, with trial and error, bit by bit, we found the right price to sell at.
Yeah, and what about you, Canary?
I would say at the start, our reliance was majorly on the data that we had about vegetable farming in the north, and we took it as the entire north was actually the right market for us to actually establish our presence. So we relied on that to actually sell out in that area.
Yeah, thank you, Canary. I suppose the final question leads us very well into the next segment of the session today. And it's just like a blanket question for both of you, is beyond this webinar, and to our participants as well, if you could share your experiences in the chat. Beyond this webinar, have you had a chance to share these learnings with other people in working in this field? Canary or Claudia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have shared some of these learnings in a number of forums. We have had learnings, just concluded the Renewable Energy Conference in Uganda. We've had some of these learnings shared, especially on how we're operating. Maybe what has not come out clearly is the corrections that we have actually had. Maybe that is what is distinct in this kind of webinar, knowing exactly what has failed, because we normally talk about the successes, but what of those failures that we've had? I think that has come out strongly in this. When you look at what has been shared, they are part of the things that we've actually gone through. And I think they have been good lessons for us to actually adjust and be able to remain sustainable in the market. Thank you.
Yeah, and what about you, Claudia?
Same here. I've been on a couple of panels around the topic of failure. So I had the chance to publicly share it. There was a paper actually written by Ronan after the failure of Ininieri, of what went wrong and what some of the mistakes might have been or were. And then I'm also in general when we work with like grant providers, or there is usually a session at the end of like what were the learnings, and so we are generally able to share in a broader setting what went well and what didn't. And then also there are forums uh, um, like finance forums, or we just had the Africa Week at Norsken in Rwanda, or other larger events where yeah, I sometimes get the chance to talk about it as well. So yes.
Oh, thank you both for being such amazing panelists. Over to you, Ronan.
Thank you, Nazifa. Let me send us swiftly on our way to the team project team leader, Tash, who is joining us through migraine. Bless you. So over to you to explain the Humanitarian Energy Learning Platform, Tash.
Thank you very much, Ronan. So at the beginning of this webinar, Therese posed a question about how do we maximize learnings going forwards, and as well as conducting this whole piece of research on this gnarly topic of failure and why projects fail. Through this project, we did also try to produce some suggestions on how to improve learning from failure. And there were really four key bottlenecks we identified that shaped the system that we ultimately proposed. So the first one is that there's a real lack of visibility in what has been done before. So we find that knowledge is often buried in donor reports if it's written up. Often it's in people's head and it's based on their personal experiences. It's clear that enormous gains could be made from shining a light on projects that have already happened and on connecting people who have worked on similar things. And connected to this is the lack of visibility about results. So even if you're aware of a relevant project or a pilot or an initiative, it can be very hard to find out what happened to it in the end. And then all of this kind of opacity leads to duplication of interventions, duplications of learnings, and like a failure to stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us. And in response to each of these challenges, we kind of devised this system, which we called the Humanitarian Energy Learning Platform, which spells out the very nice acronym of HELP. And the idea behind this is that it provides a structured way of capturing learnings and outcomes, leading to increased efficiency and effectiveness of interventions. So Ronan, if you can go to the next slide. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on HELP because there's lots about it in the report if anyone wishes to learn more. But here's the basic idea. So at the beginning of a project, so maybe once it's been funded, but before it gets started, the project team would fill in an outset form, and this would contain some details about their project and what it hopes to do. It would also contain a proactive risk assessment, which would be structured according to the failure factors that we extracted through our research project. Then at the end of the project, they would fill in a paired form, which would say what actually happened during the project, and it would record any challenges encountered, lessons learned, some reflections on what they do differently next time. So these forms are designed to be, kind of short to fill in, but to capture enough information that could lead to some useful insights for others who may consult them at a later stage. And then another kind of critical component of this form is that it would contain contact details for people who are involved in the project. And then you can imagine that loads of these forms would feed into like a closed door system for people who are involved in the sector. That would kind of feed into this dashboard that would allow others to identify, learn from, and connect with other similar projects. Next slide, please, Ronan. So we propose that HELP should be mandated by donors and inserted into the due diligence of newly approved projects. So the idea is that project developers would use knowledge from this like bank of forms and projects to inform their project designs, to learn from others who might have had similar experiences. Equally, donors could use the intelligence that comes from HELP and the analysis of this like bank of projects to ensure that they're funding appropriate projects and that risks have been appropriately considered and mitigated against. And our kind of theory is that ultimately this will lead to an enhanced understanding of why projects, technologies, and business models succeed and fail, which would ultimately allow better programming that uses resources more efficiently and effectively. We think that this would ultimately result in higher quality projects that are able to provide better products and services to end users. And we think it would also help increase accountability in the sector by lending visibility to what projects actually achieved versus what was promised. And over to the next slide and to Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Tash, and to all the colleagues, and especially to Innovation Norway to also for funding and really supporting this report, but actually more broadly a kind of more honest dialogue. We're really glad to see this out there. And yes, I would maybe go back to what Tara said at the beginning of the call. It's really the funding landscape at this stage is not a gap, but a void. I saw some analysis recently that the humanitarian sector is currently 26% funded, which means we're back to the levels of funding from 2015, where there was half the number of displaced people in the world. And so it's we really see that it's really a time to make sure that we're using resources as effectively as possible and learning from the past and designing new programs with that learning in mind. So I think basically since 2018, the GPA has been asked by our partners to create these spaces for knowledge sharing, for documenting lessons learned. And we've done that through webinars, through reports, through ad hoc advisory, which is all great. But currently we're in the age of AI and advanced digital tools, and we really want to use those to the best of our ability. So you'll see on the slide that today where we're at is we have these kind of 7 case studies documented and started, and that's a great start. What we would really like to move towards is to building a kind of AI-backed platform that's specifically focused on learning from the past to design for the future. That could, really document what's been learned. It could point people to the right other people who have done other similar projects to discuss and learn from each other more directly. It could also look kind of geospatially at what type of projects and supports are needed where. So we really want to kind of build this platform. And we see the impact of that being to help save costs, to really look at this do no harm angle, really make sure that the energy services and projects that are developed in the future are really meeting end users' needs and designed to the best of their ability. And also areas where we can leverage public and private capital together to kind of decrease the need for public funding for different types of energy services. And so the GPA, we could host this. We would really love to pilot it. What it could look like is getting 50 case studies written up and kind of prototyping a proper AI-backed tool to make sense of that data, demoing a kind of chatbot that would then help decision makers, test their theories of change when they're developing new projects, and so forth. And we would like to pilot that soon, within the next year or so. I think we estimate that around 80K could be a start, basically. And then in the future, we would like to build that out for the sector, kind of based on the learnings of this initial phase. So it's really a call out to any colleagues or donors or funders or partners who would like to go on that journey together with us. And yeah, we really want to make this not just a report where we documented knowledge, but a real tool that could help make change in the future. Thanks. Back over to you, Tash or Ronan.
Great. Thank you so much for talking us through that. Very much appreciated. And I know we're joined by Shadrach. Well done for joining us, Shadrach. What I'd like to do is a bonus kind of 6 minutes rapid fire sharing from you, if you wouldn't mind. So please tell us about this MBEA program that SNV conducted in Kakuma, and if you can just share any learnings, any findings, any recommendations, please. We're all yours for the last 5 minutes of the call. So over to you, Shadrach.
All right, thank you so much, Ronan. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Is your video working, or are you? Is it a difficult connection?
Let me see. I've just landed. Actually, I'm still at the airport.
Got it. Okay.
But that is Shadrach, colleagues. That is my face, for those who do not know me. And I'll quickly talk about the MBEA project. MBEA means market-based energy access. And that is a project that we executed in Kakuma and Kalobei refugee camp in Turkana County. We were trying to pilot a market-based access instead of refugees relying on donor or humanitarian aid for energy access. And I will say it's a project that completed in September, and it was quite successful. we can confidently say, recently, that we've proven that market-based energy access is workable, but of course, there is a lot to be improved. What worked well for us was the use of local technologies and local approach, meaning having many operations to be conducted within the refugee camp. For instance, we had stove production units that we supported the establishment in the refugee camps, meaning we'll use locally available materials, and that will make the stoves to be a bit cheap. It also help in creating employment for the refugees and the host communities. We had a component on energy access, where we were linking village loans, savings and loans associations to the mainstream finance institutions in order to be able to finance some of the renewable energy devices. Noting that these technologies are expensive, and the situation in the BG camps with regards to purchase power and the poverty levels prohibit refugees from accessing these technologies. We had pay-go models for some of the electronic or electric pressure cookers, which also help the refugees to be able to access them with a small deposit and then continue paying over time. There was a lot of private sector engagement, and this is very important. SNV, we are not providers of these technologies, we are only conveners or catalysts. So the use of private sector in the refugee camps was quite critical for us, because these are the people who provide those technologies. Challenges quickly was about technology. The capacity within the refugee camps is still quite low. Some of these technologies require highly skilled personnel. For example, configuration of solar components. We had a challenge converting some of the EPCs, electric pressure cookers, to internet IoT enabled to be able to be used, to be able to utilize the pay-go system of payment. Then in a refugee camp, there are a lot of socioeconomic dynamics. We are talking about 22 nationalities and over 52 communities. So they have got varied cultural differences. There are still challenges with regards to registration of persons in refugee camp, and this prohibits them from accessing finance within the camps. And the other challenge we faced was quality. Some products come with low quality compared to their cost, and this discourages the refugees and the host communities from accessing them. Recommendation for uptake or for upscale for partners who will wish to venture into energy access in humanitarian or in displacement is that there is need to strengthen skills, to train local labor, because as I said, these technologies require highly skilled personnel, so there is need to have local labor who are trained, and that means I also need to partner with local institutions, training or TVETs around the camp, so that we have labor and skills locally available. With regards to finance, we need to be more innovative in finance and have an inclusive financing mechanism for the refugees. I talked about refugees not having good registration documents, so that prohibits them from accessing finance facilities like loans. There is need to review the know your customer policies among the finance institutions in order to accommodate the refugees. There is also need to expand productive use of energy, so that energy services can also be used or can enable livelihoods, other livelihoods within the refugee camps. Not to focus only on lighting and cooking, we also need to focus on productive use, so that energy can catalyze other economic activities within the camps. Then there is need to build trust among the customers on these technologies. How do we do that? By ensuring that we have good quality technologies being disseminated in the camps, and also having robust after-sales services in the camps. This will build a trust among the consumers, both the refugees and the host communities. I would like to summarize like that, Ronan, and once again, participants and fellow panelists, I'm so sorry for checking in late.
Not at all, Shadrach. Thank you so much. You really do get the Trooper Award for dialing in from the runway, it seems. So thank you. That was excellent. Really appreciated. And astonishingly, we only ran over by 1 minute. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us right through to the end. I hope you found that interesting, useful. There will be a webinar recording made available. Please do read the report. Please do email in to Amy Jenks. Thanks, Nazifa, for sharing the email if there are any questions or to discuss the future of help. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.